Two undefeated teams putting it on the line tonight. St. X and Anderson in the Division I Regional Final. This was supposed to be a hair-pulling, mouth-smashing, toe-twisting, in-your-face affair. As Lynn Matuzik tells us, that's exactly what it was.
An overflow crowd on hand to see the battle of the unbeatens. Number 1 St. X taking on number 2 Anderson.
I wasn't going to fail, Vince, and I wasn't going to let anybody around me fail.
2 plays later, Solomon, off right tackle, squirms his way into the end zone. St. X goes to the locker room on top, 7-0.
It isn't that some of my friends played football. All of my friends played football.
Finally, it all came down to this. Late in the fourth quarter, 4th and 2 Anderson from the St. X 30-yard line. They give it to Druso, and now it all depends on the spot of the ball. Head coach Vince Soriano waiting on pins and needles.
And he doesn't say Muller, and he doesn't say Princeton, and he doesn't say yes. It says, let's go! What a game it'll be! What everybody's looking at!
I coached in Indiana for 3 years, and my wife got transferred down here, so I sent out letters to all the coaches in Cincinnati, and I got 2 replies. Steve Rasso from St. X wrote me a letter, said he didn't have anything, and then Vince called me, and we started talking, and they needed a science teacher and a football coach, so I got a hold of Mr. Hall, the principal at the time, got my resume sent in, and everything was by paper then. It wasn't all electronic, and came down and interviewed with Vince, interviewed with Mr. Hall and Paul Hamilton at central office, and and I got hired. I was 1988, and I was a young guy, 25, 26 years old or so, and came down, met Randy Corbett and Bob Parrish and some of the other guys we coached with that first year, and we started off.
On Friday nights, it's not like it was now. My sophomore year was Coach Serrano's first year here. We went 1-9 that year, and people didn't really get too excited for football. My junior year, we went 5-5, and that was the best record we'd had in the last 17 years. So it wasn't really exciting. My senior year went 5-5, and that's when the momentum started building as far as getting bigger crowds here.
And we had some really just good players, tough kids. They just didn't know how to win. And we lost some close games that year. Ended up 5-5 though, which was really good. It was totally different. Those were the days where we practiced up on the hill in the grass. We loaded my pickup truck up every day with all the equipment, took it up there. We didn't have a shed up there or anything, and it was just a lot of hard work. And I think two-a-days that year is one of the hottest years we've ever had. And we had more two-a-days back then. We might have had 15 of them, or 12 to 15 of them, quite a bit. And but those kids were tough, and they worked really hard. And, it was a fun year.
Soriano's first year was the first year I ever played football. I was not into sports before that. I had a couple of buddies that had been talking to me about playing football, and Eric Krell said, "You got to come and listen to this guy talk at least." And Coach Soriano came in town to basically yell at the team for not lifting in the off season. They were having like 12, 14 guys show up for the lifting program. So Eric's like, "Man, you got to at least come and listen to this guy talk." So we went to the fine arts room, and he yelled at us for about 45 minutes for not coming out and lifting. And that was the first time I'd ever met him, first time I really thought about playing football. And I bought in. I was hook, line, and sinker ever since. He was so intense, his passion, his love for the game, just so contagious. I bought in.
I came in June of 1987, and I left in February of 2007. So I had coached the seasons from 1987 through 2006. So it was a total of 20 years I was the head coach at Anderson High School. I am from the eastern side of Ohio, from a little town right across the river from Wheeling, West Virginia called Martins Ferry, Ohio. And I had coached there for 10 years as an assistant. And then I got my first head coaching job at age 31 at a little rural high school called Cadiz in Cadiz, Ohio, which had about 400 students in the school. So, but they had really, really good football there. And in my 3 years there, we had gone 21-9. And after the 1985 season, which was my second season, I got picked to coach in the All-Ohio All-Star game up in Massillon, which at that time was a really, really big deal. So they picked 4 coaches from the South and 4 coaches from the northern part of Ohio. Well, in going through that process, you spent 2 weeks in the Massillon-Canton area coaching, plus all the meetings that you had in the winter to get organized. My roommate and a guy that I became very good friends with in this process was a coach named Lou Sincar, who was the head coach at Forest Park. I said, look, Lou, if there's ever a job in Cincinnati that opens at one of those high schools that you think I would be interested in and would be a good job, I said, just please give me a call and let me know.
One of my first years we were here, our football team wasn't doing well. They just couldn't win, and so we started looking for a new football coach. And we went out and had a lot of people applied, even though we hadn't won any football games. A few years before I came here to Anderson High School, I was principal at Little Miami High School. And we played a team up in Cadiz, Ohio, close to the Martins Ferry and close to the Ohio River. And so we went up there, and Cadiz just beat us every which way they could think of beating us. But I mean, they were so organized, and the town was just fired up. And this great coach that they had is Vince Suriano. And so then a couple years went by. He applied for the job down here.
I went through the 1986 season, and at the end of the season, Lou calls me on the phone and said, hey, I have a job for you. I said, wait. He said, Anderson High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. I said, honestly, I've never heard of the place. He said, that's because they're not very good in football. And I looked at him, he says, but I really think if they get a guy like you with your enthusiasm and the way you'll work the program, they've got athletes there because they're good in other sports.
Came down to interview for 2 jobs, the King's job, which the superintendent from King's had been at Cadiz before, and the Anderson job. And you asked me which one I thought was probably the better job, and I said, you can't go anywhere but up, Vince. Anderson's the worst program in Cincinnati. I mean, all you have to do is win 2 games, and that'll be more than they won the last 3.
He was just the kind of coach that I wanted, so I made one of the best decisions I've ever made, and I hired him.
My senior year was Coach Suriano's first year, so it was definitely a different change of scenery. Well, when he first came, I remember the first game we played here was a scrimmage game, I believe, against Harrison, and we came out and we got to the field, and he looked at me and he said, where is everybody? And I was like, this is it. I mean, there might have been 100 people in the stands.
For the first couple of years, we struggled. You know, we had a tough time, and he told me, when I hired him, he said, we're going to get pushed around. We're not strong. And he said, we got to get a great weight program here, and we got to build these kids up. And we start pushing people around instead of they're going to be pushing us around for a while. And then after a while, we started winning, and it was just great. And the school spirit was special. I mean, there's just something about a great football program that does a lot for school spirit.
In 1991, we noticed that there was a public television cable station, Anderson Community Television, and my dad started talking, well, we got to do the football games on there. And that's really how it got started.
Yeah, there's a guy that worked for the TV station named Tim Pennington that Dad talked with, and actually between Dad and Tim, they're the ones that started it. And the very first game we did was the 1991 last game of the season against the Anderson Turpin game.
Anderson versus Turpin, that was a team that had Lou Andreadis as the feature back for the Redskins, and Dennis Rucci was the feature back for Turpin. And it was a great, great game. And and we had the best time doing it. And after that game, we couldn't wait for the next season because my dad was already making plans for us to do a few more games in 1992, and it went on from there.
You don't want to eat up all your remaining time. They may go right through the middle here. Let's see, 1st and 10, ball on the 6. Hand off to Andriades.
Goes up the middle, oh my!
Up to the middle, and he scores!
Touchdown! Touchdown, Lou Andriades!
5 seconds remaining in the game. Scores on a keep.
The fans go crazy.
And look at that Anderson bench. Look at the fans.
The fans go crazy.
As Siriano continued his journey, things started to feel a little different around town. From developing a culture of winning at the school, Anderson began to gain more respect throughout the greater Cincinnati area. They capped off the 1990 season with a 7-3 record and finished the 1991 season at 9-1, losing only to Norwood and Ohio's Mr. Football, future Notre Dame standout and eventual Super Bowl winner, fullback Mark Edwards. After transforming the atmosphere at Anderson, the Redskins were ready to be recognized as a legitimate contender in town.
I think 2 times that I go back to personally a lot is the Norwood game. That was a revenge game. They were the only team that beat us our junior year, and they had Mark Edwards, arguably the best player in the state, between him and Jason Druso, and one of the best players in the country, and probably definitely the best player I've ever played against. So that was a huge night, and we knew if we could beat them, we had a good chance of making the playoffs, where we missed at 9-1 our junior year.
You can feel it in the air at Anderson. A make-it-or-break-it game is coming up on Friday night. Vince Siriano had the Redskins 9-1 last season. The only loss, Norwood. That's why Anderson can't wait for another shot at the Indians.
The whole winter, all of us have been working hard, and it's time now. All this work's paid off, and yeah, this is where we put it to the test. It stuck with us. I mean, we've thought about it all winter, and we're coming out here, and we're just going to get it done.
Norwood features the top running back in the city, Mark Edwards, who also plays a pretty mean linebacker on defense. But don't think for a minute the Indians are just a one-man gang.
If they want to key on just one man, let them. We'll run around them all night. We'll pass on, we'll do whatever. And we got more than one man.
2 good football teams knocking heads, so something's got to give, doesn't it?
Well, we're not.
I hear you. Yes, sir. For the lonesome one, this is the twos going head-to-head.
Let's kick off this feverish Friday of football with Brett Haber's report on this grudge match.
Homecoming night at Anderson, and they were feeling the fever because they knew, even though it was only week 4, playoff implications rode on this game, and you didn't have to be Vince Lombardi either to understand the game plan. Power running straight up the middle. For Norwood, who else? Mark Edwards on the 2-yard plunge. He goes over 5,000 yards on the career. Indians go up 6-0. For Anderson, the other number 44, Jason Druso, breaking tackles here. That's good for the score. Tack a field goal onto that, and the Redskins hit the locker room with a 3-point advantage. We pick it up now in the second half. More of the same. The 2 teams traded rushing touchdowns, and then the game breaker. 3rd and 3, Norwood driving. Mark Edwards picks up the first down, but fumbles the ball. And the Redskins go to 4-0, downing Norwood 23-21. With the fever in Anderson, Brett Haber, Channel 9 Sports.
Thanks, Brett.
The class of 93, the graduating class of 93. So we were also the very first 7th grade class at Anderson High School. So, you know, as 6th graders, we're all thinking about middle school, and then we all find out you're going to high school. So it's 7 through 12. So that was a bit of an adjustment, right? Then you go in, myself, you know, and most of my buddies, you know, we all couldn't wait to play football. And then you get this new coach, Vince Siriano. Nobody knows who this guy is. He's from, you know, Eastern Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia kind of region, and you know, he looks like Rocky Balboa, and you don't know who he is, and you're scared to death and excited all at the same time. I'm not shy to say I was a leader in that group, and so I wasn't going to fail, Vince, and I wasn't going to let anybody around me fail.
We moved here when I was in 3rd grade, and Coach Siriano wasn't the head coach yet, but my parents started taking us to games when we were really young. So we came to games all the time when they were terrible. And they used to lose all the time, but we still wanted to play football. We always wanted to play football, so we got very lucky that Coach Siriano came in and got the train rolling for us. It isn't that some of my friends played football. All of my friends played football. My whole life revolved around this in a good way.
After beating Harrison to end the regular season, Anderson was primed to make the playoffs for the first time in school history. Entering the game as the USA Today's number 3 ranked high school football team in the country, the Princeton Vikings, led by head coach Pat Mancuso, were heavily favored to beat the Redskins. On a cold and snowy evening in November, the Anderson Redskins had different plans.
So there's no doubt it's difficult to get in there into the playoffs. Back then, I mean, you almost had to win everything, every game to even have a chance. And in fact, that's what happened to us. Our sophomore year, we were 7-3, and you didn't even talk about the playoffs. Our junior year, we were 9-1. Somebody might have mentioned them, but we never even thought we had a chance.
Good evening, welcome to Barnett Stadium on the campus of Middletown High School for tonight's high school state playoff game between the Princeton Vikings and the Anderson Redskins.
Those guys never thought they were going to lose. Now, and if you look back on that, that's kind of crazy to think that way, because the 92 team was the first team that went to the playoffs.
With me right now is Coach Siriano. Coach, thanks for joining us. First of all, how was your week's practice this week?
We had a good week of preparation. The kids practiced real hard. We got a lot of things done, and I think we're mentally and physically prepared for this football game.
Now, you could say that the team before that, the 91 team, is really the first playoff team, because back then they only took 4 playoff teams, and they were the number 5 seed. And that year they went 9-1 and lost to Mark Edwards when he was at Norwood, who played in the NFL for many, many years. So, but they never thought they would ever lose. But there weren't that many winning seasons before they got to that position.
No problem focusing on a situation, not being in awe of the Princeton Vikings or anything like that.
No, not at all. We know they're a good football team, but we feel we're a good football team, and we're going to be ready to play.
What people don't realize is, in those times, we were in Division I, the biggest division, but we were one of the smallest schools in Division I, if not the smallest. I know we were definitely not in the middle of the pack or higher.
Weather's kind of not cooperating tonight. How do you think it's going to affect the game?
I really don't know yet, because the field's still hard. It just depends on how slick the ball gets and how wet the players get. But we both seem to be run-oriented football teams, so I don't know how much it'll affect it.
Then first game, we draw Princeton High School. And back then the big thing was, the big-time nationally recognized programs were in the USA Top 25, Super 25 poll. And I want to say Princeton was like number 5 on the list.
Tell me a little bit what you know about Princeton.
Well, I think Princeton has great speed, team speed, and they have good size. They're very well coached. They run the option very well, the dive option, and defensively they play a 50. So, they're a good football team.
So we just worked our whole, high school, junior high careers to get to this moment, and we get to play them. We're playing them up in Middletown, Ohio, pep rallies, everybody's nervous, nobody knows what's going on. The only people that weren't nervous were us, because this was our destiny, right? This is what we said we were gonna do. I remember them looking at us thinking they were gonna just run right over us, because they were big Princeton, number 5 in the country, whatever they were, perennial powerhouse. And then as the game went on, I remember them, looking at us like we were nuts. They're all in sweatshirts and long sleeves, and we're bare-armed and bare chest, bellied, and shirts tucked up in our shoulder pads, and we are not going away. And so as that night went on, it was a battle. There's no doubt. Game ends, it's 7-7. So here we go into overtime with Princeton, 7-7. They get the ball and they go, and they kick a field goal. We hold them to a field goal. So here we are now. It's Anderson's ball. We're losing 10-7. We got to score a touchdown or kick a field goal to tie. And so We run a few plays. I think we might have got a first down in there. We march down, and we're just pounding it. We're running right at them. I'm playing fullback, Drusso's playing tailback. You know, our line is just doing awesome. We're just blowing these guys up and running right at their strength. So we find ourselves fourth and, you know, a foot, fourth and inches, whatever. Coach calls timeout, and here we go over to the sideline. Coach has got everybody in there, you know, the coaches, the players are all huddled, and Coach Siriano says, all right, we're kicking the field goal. We're gonna tie this up, we're going to a second overtime. We got a great kicker. We called him Little Buddy, Dave Lawrence, and no offense to Little Buddy, I wasn't having it. And I remember looking at Siriano and saying, we're going for it. And I remember hearing everybody saying, we're going for it. And Coach looked at us and he said, we're going for it. And at that point, it was like, you know, the play gets called in the huddle. We go running out to the field. We call it again in the huddle. Jay Bell does his count. If you watch the video, we have one too many guys on there. And I remember Nate running to get off the field. And he gets a set, we go.
Drusso. Took that handoff, went on the right side, and the Anderson Redskins are advancing to the state playoffs to play St. next Saturday night at Welcome Stadium. What a game! Look at those Anderson fans! Oh my gosh, I don't know if you can hear our call. We were so excited in this booth. Brad has left the booth. He's going to run down the field and try to talk to some of the players. What a game for the Anderson Redskins. Oh my gosh, Jason Drusso, they've gone to him all year. They needed 18 inches, he got it for him. He took the handoff and he barely got into that end zone. And the Anderson Redskins, in their first playoffs in the history of the school, will advance to the second round of the state playoffs and play St. Xavier. Boy, what an unbelievable game. Jason Drusso. Drusso was held well under his yardage for the night, but he got the yards when they needed him. And I'll tell you, one of the best games we've seen.
It's an awesome time in my life, one of my favorite times in my life. The atmosphere in '92 especially, was that there was a lot of expectations for our team. We had a very good class. We were coming off of we were kind of that class that was between the Stowe years and the Siriano years. And it was just such a buzz here at Anderson. News was starting to show up, newspapers were starting to show up, talk about us. And it was like for the first time in a while that I could remember, people were talking about Anderson football, and the school was excited, and it was an electric place to be. And we were selling out, Brown Stadium and packing Galbraith Field. Some pretty cool times.
of preparation getting ready for this football game. And all week people have talked about us being the underdogs, and last week they talked about us being the underdogs. But I'll tell you, we have one psychological advantage that they don't have. And you know what it is? It's you! Because when we take the football field, we play for you. We play for the community of Anderson Township. We play for the neighborhood. We play for the elementary school. We don't play for a building and a name. We play for real people.
Waycross Community Television presents 1992 Ohio High School Athletic Association Division I State Regional Final Game. The St. Xavier Bombers and the Anderson Redskins. Live from Galbraith Field in Kings Mill, Ohio. We're panning the crowd that is still filing in as the cars are coming in. We're going to go right down on the field now to Dan Gibbons, who's standing by with the athletic director, Pete Boylan, as the Anderson Redskins. Fourth down and 2 to go as the Anderson Redskins have been used to this situation before. They faced it all last week. They had a big fourth down on the last series, and they're looking at one right here. St. Xavier converted their fourth down. There's that wishbone, eye bone, Steve, that you were talking about. Here comes the handoff to Druso. He's trying to get inside, and if he gets a positive mark, he's going to have it. If he doesn't get it, he's not going to have it, unless that chain can really stretch. I got a feeling this could be a first down. It is not the St. Xavier Bombers. Oh, Dan, you and I were both wrong, and that's a first. I mean, not that we can't make mistakes, but I mean, buddy, you called him right all year long.
Well, I'll tell you
Look at Bradley over here gloating. He's just saying, I knew it wasn't a first down.
You know what?
I knew it was going to be close. I didn't want to say anything.
Just how close these teams are. Just how close this game is. That was about 1 or 2 inches, and Anderson comes up
an inch or two short. Now the Bomber offense has the pressure.
We went into that season expecting to win state, so I'd be lying to you to tell you that that was a magical season. We were really disappointed with the loss to St. Xavier in the regional final. Looking back, maybe we should have been okay with how we performed against St. Xavier. We really felt like we let that one get away from us. Yeah, we felt like we were the better team, honestly, afterwards, and it took us a long while to get over that.
And to you guys,
football players, I would like for you to stand up for a second, the whole football team. I told you this after the St. X game, and I know you were a little bit teary-eyed, and I don't think if you understood it. But I want you to look around at each other. For the rest of your lives, you are going to remember each other. You will remember what you have accomplished. You may not realize it at this point in time, but 5 and 10 years down the road, you're going to look at that championship ring. And you're going to look at that highlight film, and tears are going to come to your eyes. And you're going to wonder what each of you are doing, where you're at. And you're going to remember that special bond that you had on those Friday nights, and the way you held hands with each other in the huddle, and the way we prayed before the game, and the way we prayed after the games together. You will be the measuring stick for the Anderson football teams of the future. You are the greatest football team in the history of Anderson High School.